I am a die-hard Essendon supporter, although by Melbourne standards I'm still a Johnny-come-lately. Because I only came to Melbourne when I was 16, so I didn't grow up with football. I was born overseas. And through my 20s and 30s, I didn't really barrack for anyone in Melbourne for a long time. I still loved the footy. When we first came to Australia, I barracked for West Perth when we lived in Perth. And when I came to Victoria, I couldn't understand what this whole separate league was. But anyway, I could never attach myself to a team. So even though I followed the football and I knew about the Jeselenkos and I knew about all the different characters and Ron, of course, it wasn't until about 83 that I actually aligned myself with the Mighty Bombers. And that's partly because my partner was a die-hard Essendon supporter. And so I've been a supporter since 83, and I go to, as I say, 1 film a year and 18 games of football minimum a year. I go every week. Now, when I say I've worked with Ron Barassi, I didn't actually play full forward for him or on the wing or anything like that, but I've been on a couple of panels with Ron. We did the Radio National quiz. I was the host of that for a year for the ABC, and one of the first shows we did was about the Italian heritage of a lot of Melbourne people, Australian people in fact, and Ron was one of our first guests. So that was when I found out about his early life and how he was brought up by Norm Smith and his Italian heritage. So it's just fantastic to be working on this play now, to see that whole story, which is just such an iconic Australian story, particularly a Melbourne story. Melba, you know, I like to believe she was a marvellous opera singer from Melbourne, but in fact I won't be singing in the show. Melba is the narrator of what happens, and in some ways she's a filter of how we see Ron through the years, because she's a die-hard Collingwood supporter, which is going to be some of my finest acting will be involved in wearing the black and white. She's a Collingwood supporter because Collingwood suffered at the hands of Ron Barassi in his days with Melbourne and Carlton. So, you know, he's the arch enemy for her. But as time goes on and she follows his story and presents his story and sees the whole man, the whole person, this is what happens with our audience as well. So I'm sort of like the person who guides that journey through the play. I have to say that I'm going to have to practice very hard to say "can the pies." So if you don't look my fingers crossed, "can the pies, can the pies," or you have to do the modern one actually, which is Collingwood, Collingwood. When that rings out in the MCG, people get quite scared. Not Essendon supporters, of course, but people.